The Children's March. Segregation in Birmingham wasn't just a way of life, it was the law. The city's radical segregation ordinance, adopted in 1944, demanded almost total separation of blacks and whites. Many southern cities mandated separate drinking fountains, bathrooms, schools, and seats on buses for blacks and whites. But Birmingham's ordinance, separate but equal facilities, were far from equal but inferior to that of the whites. All ways of life were blocked by black access, including better jobs, nicer houses, and greater political influence that whites enjoyed. Generations of African Americans grew up with these injustices and lived their whole lives powerless to change the situation. In March of 1963, movement activists were plotting strategies to seize the rights that blacks had been denied. Blacks debated about which tactics to use to end segregation. Legal and cultural oppression was deeply ingrained in the South. Those that talked or attempted to work for change were dealt with violently. The law seemed to look the other way. In some cases, the law seemed to actually be on the side of the lawbreakers that committed crimes of violence to maintain segregation. In Birmingham, 16th Street Baptist Church was the movement's unofficial headquarters. It was perfectly situated across the street from Kelly Ingram Park, which sat between the black and white sections of town. Like many of his followers, Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King was discouraged. Many were ready to give up, but they kept meeting, talking and praying. One night when Dr. King asked who would demonstrate with him and would be ready to go to jail if arrested, all the children stood up. Dr. King was grateful for their offer and thanked them. He did not want to see the children suffer from fighting discrimination. The children, however, would not be denied the opportunity to be part of the change. This was distressing to Dr. King that the only volunteers to take action were children. He was not comfortable leading a protest with children. Reverend James Bevel, another civil rights activist and minister, encouraged Dr. King to accept the children's support. Reverend James Bevel understood that adults might be reluctant to march. They were rightfully afraid of going to jail. They were afraid of losing their jobs and hurting their families. Children were not bound by these fears. Reverend Bevel knew that when adults saw children marching in a dignified and brave manner, standing up for their rights, it would be difficult to deny the powerful reasoning and wisdom that they had shared. It made no sense to make children wait a lifetime for freedom. Everyone agreed that if children were old enough to join the church, they were old enough to decide to march. The youth assembled in the church and received their instructions for the day. The purpose of the march was to walk downtown to talk to the mayor about segregation in their city. When they made it to the Birmingham City Hall, they would kneel and pray. On May 2nd, known as D-Day, more than 1,000 students skipped their classes and gathered at the 16th Street Baptist Church to march to downtown Birmingham. Word of this bold decision quickly spread. Children and young adults told their friends. On the day of the march, they were thousands strong. As expected, the sheriff arrested the protesters, carried the children packed in paddy wagons, and put them in jail. The next day, even more children showed up to protest. Friends of the children and young adults that had been arrested joined the march. Parents and their extended families got involved. This happened again the following day. Eventually, more than 1,000 children were in jail. On the evening of May 3rd, King offered encouragement to the parents of the young protesters in a speech delivered at the 16th Street Baptist Church. He said, "Don't worry about your children. They're going to be all right. Don't hold them back if they want to go to jail, for they are not only doing a job for themselves, but for all of America and for all of mankind." The great number of arrests happened again the following day. The Commissioner of Public Safety, Eugene Bull Connor, oversaw the police and the fire departments, public schools, libraries, and the health department. He used vicious ways and tried to beat down the challenge of segregation. He instructed police to beat marchers with their nightsticks. He ordered them to release police dogs on the children, allowing dogs to bite. He directed the fire department to turn the fire hoses on the children, so strong the force of water could strip bark off trees. The images of children being blasted by high-pressure fire hoses, clubbed by police officers, and attacked by police dogs appeared in local, then national, and then international news organizations in print and in TV. When people all over the country and the world saw the pictures of this brutal misuse of police power, all directed at children, it triggered outrage throughout the country. Filling the jails in Alabama with thousands of children whose crime was to advocate for normal childhood was a gross injustice that a few could stomach. Even fewer could justify it. Up to now, it was not possible to get adults to address the hypocrisy and injustice of segregation. Now adults all across the nation demanded change. After interventions from the U.S. Department of Justice, the Birmingham campaign ended on May 10th, when the SCLC and the local officials reached an agreement in which the city promised to desegregate stores and release all protesters from jail if the SCLC would end the boycotts and demonstrations. After the chaos and embarrassment of the Birmingham's Children's March that lasted from May 2nd to May 10th, President Kennedy could no longer stand by and watch. The action of the youth and the teens had wakened the nation. The ugly, violent, and unjust situation in Alabama was no longer a local issue. This march began a series of events that paved the way for the Civil Rights Acts of 1964 and changed the world forever.